If you've been following along with my stash busting project, you'll know that one of the patterns I've been wanting to tackle is this 1940s sock pattern. And what appealed to me about this pattern is it's not only made of oddments in true make do amend style, but it's also knit flat and seamed up. Many of you were just as intrigued by this unusual pattern as I was, so I decided to dedicate an entire video to the making of these socks. Here we are, let's take a closer look at the pattern. Cup of tea, naturally. Yes, so odd scraps of coloured wools can be used most effectively for these charming fancy striped ankle socks on 2 needles. So materials 2 number 30 knitting needles, pointed both ends. And amazingly, I came across in a charity shop, well, I didn't, my mum did, but she has an excellent eye for these things. A whole set, 13, 14 and 15, and so these are original vintage, aero, stainless steel, size 13 knitting needles. So not only is this an original vintage pattern, we're using original vintage needles for this. And it's one of those things about the graphic design of the packaging is just so beautiful. Got a little bit missing here, but oh well. With specially tapered points which will not injure the fingers. It's just a nice touch really, that, isn't it? Also obtainable aero knitting pins and all the usual jumper sizes. I only need 2 of these apparently, so should we look at our specially tapered points? Yeah, I mean, I guess, I don't know. Must have been a novelty in the 30s or 40s, whenever these are from. So I've got my 2 number 30 knitting needles and then an ounce of 3-ply fingering in main shade and 1 ounce in mixed colours. So I'm using the leftovers from my rainbow cardigan, and I've already divided some of them into 2 because that's the first step it tells you to do. And I did that. Tell me that's not a moth. No, it's a bit of grass. Phew. So I've already done that in preparation for casting on. So my main shade is going to be this pink because I had the most of that left, and then yellow, green, and then this, blue, naturally, and then this sort of tan colour. So I haven't really decided on an order yet. Oh well, I have time because first of all, we're going to cast on for the rib at the top in the main colour. Really interestingly, it gives you absolutely exact measurements. When you work the multicolour stripes, 2 rows of knitting in each stripe, remember that you will need approximately 1.5 yards of wool to work 1 stripe of leg part, so that's 2 rows, or 3/4 yard to work each stripe across instep. This will enable you to judge before starting a stripe whether you will have enough wool to complete it. So they're that precise. So this was a proper make do amend pattern. You know, they're anticipating you making it out of lengths of yarn that you've got left over. So I think that's fascinating. What sort of cast on should I do? I should probably do a long tail cast on. How many stitches do I need? 60. So I think I'm going to do the thumb method because I've seen that suggested in some of my how to knit knitting guides from the 40s and 50s and things. The logical choice for a historically accurate pair of socks.
Of course, the issue with a long tail cast on is estimating how much of a tail to leave. I got it wrong on the first try. And the second.
Okay, so 3rd time's the charm, and I've got my stitches cast on. As you can see, it's going to be quite snug on this very short needle, but these are the only double pointed needles in the right size that I have, so we're going to have to make it work. Took me 3 attempts, and I was getting really head up about it, and then I remembered, of course, I will need to sew these up. So actually having quite a long yarn tail is going to be a bonus, really. However, this is more of an appropriate length rather than like a full yard of yarn left. And I've also decided on the colour of my stripes. So this will be the main body, so like the dark bit on the diagram. And so then it will be cream, green, yellow, blue. And I thought that would be quite a nice, so you've got like the alternating between the blue tones and the yellow tones. I suppose this one's a bit pink, but anyway. It says to do 1.25 inches of ribbing, but I don't actually have enough of this. It says 1 ounce, which is 28 grams, and I have about 23. So I'm gonna make the ribbing shorter, and hopefully that means I'll be able to get to the toe, but it's looking unlikely, in which case I might do a contrast toe. I'm gonna make a start on the ribbing, and I'll check back in with you when I'm... Amazingly, I was interrupted by somebody ringing me on the phone. Who even are they? I can't remember what I was saying. I've decided on my colours. I'm going to knit the rib and then I'll check back in with you when I get to this point and we see what happens in terms of the construction. Okie dokie, so I've finished my rib. It's now 1 inch long and I have to do an increase row next. I'm guessing by purl twice it's like front and back. That'll do. Okay. So I've done my increases, I've trimmed my yarn and it says now break off main wool and start pattern, noting that when slipping stitches in pattern they should be slipped purlwise. So I'm going to join on my first colour, knit 3, slip 1, repeat to end. So it looks like this is very similar to the stitch pattern in the rainbow jumper. So let's make 1, 2, 3, slip purlwise. One, 2, 3, slip purlwise, and then, yep, from the end then knit 1. And then interestingly, rather than it be like a stocking stitch slip stitch pattern, it's a garter stitch. So knit 1, bring yarn forward, slip 1, take wool back, knit 3. Oh, okay, I've got it. So you're just making sure that on the right side you don't have that contrast yarn showing. Okie dokie, so I have my first stripe and now it says to break off and join on another contrasting stripe, but I think rather than do that and have loads of ends to weave in, I'm just going to carry the yarns up the edge and hopefully that will work. So the next colour I want is green, and so this time we're going to offset it. Yeah, it's exactly like the rainbow jumper. That's interesting. Slip 1, 1, 2, 3, slip 1, and then that way the slip stitches on the next row will be between the previous row. I really like these 3 colours together actually. So then that's that row, and then the wrong side row, yeah, just as I thought. Basically the same thing again. Knit 3, and then just bringing that yarn to the wrong side to slip the slip stitch. These 4 rows give you 2 stripes. Repeat them from start to start until you have 16 stripes. Okay, let's do that then. Whoop. Hey! So I've got my however many stripes it was they told me to do, 16? Yes, 16 stripes, ending with the wrong side row. Good, done that. Now slip the first 16 stitches of row and the last 16 stitches of row onto 2 stitch holders. Leaving only the central 37 stitches. I'll tell you what I can do. I can put them on my spare needles. So how many was it? 16, right? Oh, I see. Okay. So I'm going to essentially keep the central stitches and they're going to become this part. Got it. 14, 15, 16. Oh. 16. This is going to be annoying actually. So I might put them all on one. I also need to cut these. And then I carry on as before, just on this part. This is going to be fun. Welcome back to my messy desk. So I have now finished, it's really difficult to demonstrate this, I finished this top section of my socks. I don't know what you call that bit. So you see I've got all these stitches on a holder and I've knitted the upper, I guess it is. So now I have to trim all these yarns off and reattach my main colour and then do the decreases for the toe. Let's trim those off, tidy these up. So I've got plenty of yarn left. So it looks like I'm doing a very simple wedge toe, but just on the top half. Knit 3, knit 2 together. Oh, okay, so I'm doing a decrease row first. Fair enough. Knit 5, repeat to end.
After the decrease row, it was a case of decrease at each end of every other row, as you would expect for a standard wedge toe. Then those last 16 stitches get left on hold and the yarn is rejoined to the other half of the stitches, ready to work the heel. It was quite unusual doing a heel turn and gusset flat. It felt just familiar enough that I could follow the instructions, but at the same time it felt oh so wrong.
So it's been a little while. Because it's been so hot, I just haven't been up to recording basically, but I have been plodding along with this constructed flat sock. So I want to show you where I'm up to and then we can finish it off together. Basically, at the minute, it looks like this. So we knitted this part flat and it has to be seamed up the back, the ankle, and then we joined the stitches to knit the heel flap. Or either we divided the stitches and just carried on and knitted the upper of the sock. No idea what this is actually called. And then we shaped for the toe and left the stitches on the needle. It did say you could cast off and then sew them up, but I thought that's kind of pointless. Let's just graft it instead. Then you go back to the stitches here that you left and knit the heel, turn the heel as you would and pick up stitches as you would, but rather than working in rounds, you're working flat. So that threw me a little bit to start with, and I don't think I picked up my stitches in the right order, but it worked so well. And then same again, shape the toe and leave the stitches on the needle. So we've got like a flappy sock. So what I need to do is graft the stitches together at the toe and then sew up firstly like the centre back seam, but also then the top to the sole along there, and of course weave in all the ends because there's quite a few ends what with the colour work. And had I not been carrying the yarn with me, there would be an end to weave in every 2 rows. So glad I did that. But I haven't got a whole lot of yarn left. So let's hope this is enough to sew it up. And I've just thought, I don't think I even have a darning needle in here. I'll find one of those and we'll start on this. So I did eventually find a darning needle. So if you've never done grafting before, it's kind of a way of sewing together stitches so that it looks like knitting, basically.
I'll be honest with you, I did try and explain grafting here, but I'm not very good at it at the best of times, and I definitely am not good enough to be able to give you a decent explanation. What I will say is that this style of grafting is also sometimes called Kitchener stitch, as it was supposedly a requirement of socks sent to soldiers on the front line in World War I.
So knit off, purl on, purl off, knit on. So you can kind of see, because my tension's so bad, you can see where those grafted stitches are, but it can be, once you sort the tension out, really invisible. And obviously, because there's no seam there, less likely to give you trench foot. Not that I'm anticipating trench foot being an issue, although I do live in England, so. So now I've got my sock attached at the toe and this heel point, so I have to sew up this edge to this edge, this edge to this edge, and the centre back. So I think let's start with the centre back and weave in these straggly bits and then do these seams.
The sewing up was actually really difficult to get right, as I was sewing a garter stitch edge to a stocking stitch edge. It's not really very pretty and actually quite bulky on the inside, which could be really uncomfortable.
And so I finished my sock. God, that was a faff. Much easier to knit them in the round. I also had a bit of a disaster in that my toe, I pulled on the yarn to tighten up my Kitchener stitches. And the yarn snapped right at this point, so it started to unravel. So I've kind of done a bit of a ropey mend there. And I really love the way they look. I think they look so cute. However, you might be able to tell they're really small. I don't have massive feet, and I followed the instructions for the size in the pattern that I should need, but still they're really small. And I don't know if it's partly because this pattern doesn't have as much elasticity as the stocking stitch or something like that. I don't know. Or if I knitted it, it's too small, basically. So what I'm hoping is that I can gently block them to be a bit bigger. I also am not a fan of this toe. Like, it's too bulky, and yeah, I'm not sure. But it is very cute as socks go. Obviously I've got to knit the next one. I think I'll knit the next one to be the same size and then see if I can't block the pair of them to be bigger. Okay, wish me luck.
The second sock went much smoother now that I'd had a bit of practice, and so I gave them a good soak to try and block them to be bigger. As you can see though, I didn't quite have enough of the pink left to finish the toe on the second sock, so I used a bit of green. It's all very much in keeping with the Make Do and Mend look, so I don't mind. As part of my vintage clothing collection, I have a pair of CC41 shoes that I don't wear because they're too fragile, but I thought I'd give them a little outing to try and recreate the look of the socks in the pattern illustration. I was so pleased with how these turned out. If you'd like to make these socks yourself, there is a link in the description to where you can find the pattern, and if you do make them, I'd love to see them. You can share them in the brand new Retro Claude Ravelry group. Part of why I enjoy recreating these patterns from the 1940s is to get a better understanding of what it was actually like living in the 1940s for ordinary people. We in the vintage community, and I include myself in this, can be guilty of romanticising this era of history, particularly when it comes to life on the British home front. And as much as I love the design of the clothes and can marvel at the ingenuity of these Make Do and Mend designs, when I actually make them, I get a better insight into this era. Thanks for watching. See you next time.